Hi, everybody. So to get my talk started, I'm going to need a little bit of audience participation. So on the screen, you'll see a statement, and if this statement applies to you and you can identify with it, please raise your hand. The first statement: both of your parents have bachelor's degrees. Okay, it's almost all of us. The second statement: your choice of who to love was considered acceptable by your community. Okay. Third, you grew up in a community where your race was the majority. Okay. And last, you grew up in a community where your religion was the majority. Now, much like some of you, I know what it's like to be the majority. I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland, which is the most affluent, predominantly Black county in the country. And because of this, I was able to see people who are doctors, engineers, lawyers, artists, who all looked like me. And therefore were able to say that I could be whatever they could be because I was empowered by this representation. I've never really known true financial insecurities. I always knew where my next meal would come from. I've never had to been discriminated against on the basis of my sexuality or religion. I was able to afford summer camps almost every week of every summer where I was engaged in the STEM fields. And because of this, I'm here at Georgia Tech now, studying in industrial engineering in the #1 program in the nation for my major. Now to me, that looks a lot like privilege. And to be honest, as I was thinking about all the ways in which I was privileged, it was pretty hard. Because by society, I'm a double minority. So I know what it's like on the other side. And I know what it's like to have to prove my intelligence over and over again and it still not be enough. I know what it's like for people to come up to me and touch my hair like a petting zoo, or to be told that I have to conform and wear my hair a certain way to make sure that I can fit in and look like I belong. I know what it's like to be uneasy around police whose job it is to protect me, but as of late have not been doing a great job. I also know what it's like to be turned away from frat parties for no apparent reason, but on my way out, they're blasting Gucci, Migos, Drake, and Kendrick Lamar. And I share both sides of this because I want you all to see that even though I face oppression, I also have a significant amount of privilege. And so even if you're not able to identify with every part of my experiences in my life and my identity, we all have one thing in common, and that's that we all have privilege. So I want you to take the next 2 to 3 seconds just to think about all the ways in which you have privilege. Okay. And so now the title of my talk is called Why It's Important to Check Your Privilege at the Door. And for the first part, I want to address the second part of the title of the talk, which is checking your privilege at the door and how to do that. First, you must understand the intersections of your identity and understand that the intersections of your identity play a key role in how you experience privilege. Second, you must acknowledge and use your privilege for good. The key word being good, because not using your privilege at all is not the same as using it for good. And you should always figure out how you can be an advocate for others who may not have a voice or a seat at the table. And last, realizing that the power of our society lies in our ability to empower those who are most marginalized. And I'm going to get into greater detail for each of these so that you all can understand how to check your privilege at the door. First, understanding the intersections of your identity. Now, for those of you who can't tell, I am a Black woman. And I will be the first to tell you that I love everything about being a Black woman. I love our hair, I love our bodies, I love our strength, our power, but sometimes society does not see us for the same way in which we see ourselves. And so when I was thinking of ways to portray what it means to be a Black woman in America, I thought of a quote from a recent Georgia Tech alum, recent graduate, who said, To be Black in America and to be a woman in America is not the same as what it means to be a Black woman in America. And I really identified with this quote because I can't wake up in the morning and decide if I'm going to put my Blackness first or my womanhood first. I experience both simultaneously and holistically. Sometimes when I'm facing discrimination, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman and they're being sexist, or if it's because I'm Black and they're being racist. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. And so think about it like this. If you have a white woman and a Black man, the white woman experiences a significant amount of white privilege. She knows she'll never be prejudiced or discriminated against because of the color of her skin. For a Black man, he has a significant amount of male privilege. He knows that society sees him as dominant, in control, and natural-born leaders. But if you take both of the less privileged parts of their identity, for a white woman is being a woman, and for a Black man is being Black, and put that together, you can imagine some of the subtle and deliberate oppression that Black women like me might face. The second point. Acknowledge and use your privilege for good. Now, I remember about this time last year when there was a march at Centennial Olympic Park right up the street, and it was a Black Lives Matter march protest to protest against police brutality against Black people. And everyone in the Black community at Georgia Tech was either talking about it, knew someone who was going. And needless to say, there was a great turnout. And then I remember a few days later riding in the car with one of my friends who was a Black Muslim woman. And she seemed visibly upset, and so some of the people in the car tried to ask her what was wrong. And she ended up telling us that even though she supported the Black Lives Matter protest in Centennial Olympic Park, just a few days later, there was an attack on a mosque killing innocent Muslim people, no one was talking about it the same way we were talking about the Black Lives Matter march and police brutality. And because of this, it left her feeling isolated because she felt like no one could truly identify with her because of her identity. And at first when she was telling me this, I started to think and get defensive. I was thinking, I have Muslim friends. I know Islamophobia is wrong. But then I started to think, what if someone came up to me and said, I'm not racist because I voted for Obama for a third term, or I would vote for Obama for a third term, or I have Black friends like you and I know racism is wrong. That's not how we address people who are feeling isolated. It's not how you're able to relate to somebody by saying you have a Black friend or a Muslim friend. And so this was the first experience in which I felt like my privilege was being checked. I knew that I wouldn't have to go to the Muslim protest that happened right on 14th Street because it's not my religion, so it's not my problem, right? And the "it's not my problem" statement is one of the most problematic statements we can make about the identity and the experiences of other people. It's like turning a blind eye once the problem does not affect you any longer. And so I took the time in the car to understand where she was coming from, to see the oppression that Black Muslim women, a triple identity, face in this country. And I could not relate because I'm not Muslim. But all I could do at that time was understand and realize ways in which I could advocate for her and advocate for people to support them the way that people support the Black Lives Matter movement. And so my next point, empower those who are marginalized and realize that the power of our society lies in our ability to do so. I think this is the most important part, to empower people who are most marginalized. And it's no secret that people who are the minority face a significant amount of achievement and opportunity gaps. So I know for me, it's more than just about getting equal pay or getting a seat at the table. It's about feeling worthy once I'm there, feeling like my ideas and values are going to be considered worthy enough to have that seat, and people are going to take me seriously. And so I believe that the power of our society lies in our ability to influence our youth and to teach our youth that they have power and that they can have influence. And so that's why over 2 years ago, I started an organization called the Diamond Campaign, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower all women to embrace their unique cut, which is body image, color, which is personality, carrot, which is self-worth, and clarity, which is vision for the future. And we mentor weekly on a one-to-one basis with 9th through 11th graders at Crystal Ray Atlanta Jesuit School, right up the street. And our goal with this is to teach our girls that they can achieve because of their identity and not in spite of it. And so we've had some incredible success stories. The one I can think of most recently is there was a girl who was very shy about sharing her poetry. She would always come in, she would always be writing, but she would never want to share it with us because she didn't know that her words actually had power and had meaning and could influence people's lives. But I'm happy to announce that just this past Friday, she competed in her first slam poetry competition and got 2nd place. I have another mentee who, although scored an incredibly competitive score on the practice ACT, didn't think that because of her background, she could go to college. And now with the help of her mentor, she's devising a plan to apply to scholarships and ultimately attend the college of her dream. I have another mentee who, just this time last year, was experiencing extreme mental health issues. And with the help of her mentor, she's now walking the road to recovery and has hope for her future again. And we do this because, as I mentioned before, we want to give these girls the idea that they can succeed because of their identity and not in spite of it, that their identity gives them power. And so I wanted to address the first part of the title of my speech, which is why. Why is it important to lift others up? Why is it important to take note of how others are facing prejudice? Why is it important to give everyone equal human rights? And that's because with privilege comes power. And when power is not used correctly, it becomes corrupt. I'll say that again. With privilege comes power. And when power is not used correctly, it becomes corrupt. And so for those of you who are not interested in closing the achievement and opportunity gap for all people, especially those who are marginalized, this talk was not for you. There are greater issues that need to be addressed in that case. But for those of you who understand that you have privilege and want to use your privilege for good, there are 3 ways you can do that starting tomorrow or today. First, acknowledge all the ways in which you have privilege. If you actually take time to think about it, you might realize, much like me, that your religion is a privilege. Your ability to be at Georgia Tech studying with some of the brightest minds in the world is a privilege. Your background is a privilege, and the experiences that you've had, they're all privileges. Second, understand a different perspective. Take time to talk to someone who's not like you, who has a different religion, a different sexuality, a different race, to understand oppression they may face so you can figure out how you can fit in to best advocate for them. And lastly, use your privilege to lift someone up. There's a quote by Robert Ingersoll that says, "We rise by lifting others." And I love this quote. It's simple, but it speaks to the importance of understanding one another and ultimately providing love for all people, no matter their identity. Embracing diversity, because that's the key to our society and to us moving forward. And so I hope that with this talk, you all understand that you are privileged. Each of you has a privilege within you that you can use to uplift others. And so I want to thank you and let you all know that it was my privilege to be here today. Thank you.